Hello and welcome to Film Pro Productivity and Success, the podcast that helps film professionals and other creatives to live a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 54. It's my first ever interview show and it's with Ian O'Neill from How They Did It Filmmaking. And I'm back. Yes, I am back with this special in-between-isode, and it is, as I mentioned a second ago, an interview show, something I've never done before, but something I really wanted to trial. And Ian has agreed to meet with me today, and we've recorded the show, and I think it worked out pretty darn well. But I'm deep in prep for Season 4, which will launch at the end of March, and it will consist of 4 interview shows, which will be with productivity experts, 4 standard shows, if there is such a thing as a standard show, which I'll be working on myself, and 4 shows which I'm doing in collaboration with others. So it'll be another 12-episode season launching, I think it is, and I don't have it written down in front of me, but I think it is the 29th of March. That'll be coming out. This will be possibly the last show before then. I might be able to sneak in another in-between-isode, but only if I'm really on top of the 12 episodes that I'm doing. But today I'm interviewing a fellow podcaster. His name is Ian O'Neill. You might have heard me talk about him because he runs the How They Did It Filmmaking podcast, and he's also a filmmaker, and he's also, I think, principally a writer as well. And as he's a friend of the show, he agreed to come on, have a chat with me about the nuts and bolts of putting together creative projects. That's not necessarily the fun part, or what might be described as the fun part, the shooting of a film, or the recording of a podcast, or the painting of a picture or whatever, but the nuts and bolts of selling it, raising money for it, etc. So that's what we're talking about today. It's kind of well within the remit of Film Pro Productivity and what's the name of the show again? Film Pro Productivity and Success, and I'm certain it's going to be of interest to you. So let's go for it. And here he is, Ian O'Neill. How you doing, Ian?
I am great, Carter. Thank you so much for the conversation today. You know, I love talking to you, man.
I know we've spoken several times about podcasting stuff over the years we've been doing it, I think it'd be fair to say. Yeah. But today I have asked you to take me by the hand as I do my first conversational interview, which I've never done before. So thank you very much for joining me on Film Pro Productivity and Success, as it's now known. Thanks for coming along.
No worries, man. No worries at all. I mean, you know how much I love your podcast. I listen all the time, so I'm anxious to get into it. Let's talk productivity.
Let's talk productivity. Well, at the end of each show that you do, you ask 3 questions of your guests, and I figured a good way to ease ourselves into this would be to just ask you one of your own questions. And I would like to ask you to name a film that inspired you, either as a filmmaker or just in everyday life.
You know what? As a filmmaker, I can only say as a filmmaker, really, because I haven't really thought about a film that has, you know, inspired me in life. But as a filmmaker, every time I start a new project, I watch the film Misery. I love that film because knowing what they did with so little just inspires me. The fact that they have, you know, so few locations and yet are able to ramp up this thriller aspect, I love it. I absolutely love it. So that's my answer to that, is that film. I don't know about life though. I think that's enough for me anyway. I was just kind of chucking it in as a bit of an icebreaker, to be honest. But and I did throw you into that there. I didn't warn you it was coming in, but that's such a great movie because as you say, like just him to get out the bed and then get somewhere and he moves an ornament, something like that, and then he's back, and the tension that can come out of the fear of her finding out that he's done something which the audience see and he might not be aware of. I can't remember, but it's an awesome movie. Yeah, I love it. And the director is escaping me right now. I can't believe. Oh, Rob Reiner. Yeah, it's Reiner.
Cool.
He was brilliant. He was just brilliant what he did. And Kathy Bates deserved her Oscar. Just, yeah, the tension in that film, and that's why I watch it every time I start a new project, because it sort of teaches me how to manipulate the thriller aspect and that tension in such a small space. it's just brilliant. I love it. So yeah, that would be my answer. Misery.
I think it's a good one, actually, in productivity terms to ask as well, simply because, and I will get you to tell me a little bit about yourself in a second, but I've already gone off-piste. Because you do look in whatever you're doing for inspiration, whether it's a podcast, you may be listening to other podcasts and getting ideas, or if you're going into a film project or writing a film project specifically as well, you might be looking to anything to just feed you some creative energy to allow you to move forward. Would that be fair to say?
You know what? I think that's more than fair. I think everybody's looking for that. Think about it. People pitch movies, they often pitch them as this plus that. It's a Misery plus Mission Impossible. So obviously we're looking for these inspirations to even sell the damn movie. It's crazy. But yeah, I think for me personally, and I think we can probably talk in general terms, people are looking for that inspiration because a lot of the times, and this is where when I mentor people for writing, is that you have to let them know that, listen, you have the talent. It's okay. You have to have some faith in yourself. And that's what people are looking for, is to garner that inspiration so that they can have more faith in themselves. I can do this. I can do this. And I think you're right, that you really do look for something to hook into, don't you?
Yeah. And even I don't do it so much in the fight direction. I've been doing it long enough that I kind of know what I'm doing. I know what I want. But if I'm ever directing a project, I do, in effect, steal other people's ideas, but convert them into something new and interesting that works for me, and I try and bring it to a new project. Sometimes I'll let the people that I'm working on the project know that I've kind of lifted this concept from something, and maybe even show them a bit of it, or show them the style in which something is done, so that it's easier for them to understand. But it can be a good shortcut to explaining to the people you're working with what exactly you're trying to achieve as well.
You know what? I think when you said that you make it your own, that's really important, because how many books are there on filmmaking, on screenwriting, and I'm a Sid Field fan. I mean, I love structure. He's a structure hound, and I love that in my writing. I need that in my writing. But at the same time, you got to make it your own so you can be comfortable with it. Like, you can't just lift from Sid Field, or maybe you're doing a Robert McKeith's story, or you're doing, you take little chunks of that thing and you mold something that is yours.
Yeah.
And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said you make it your own. And that's important for your own inspiration, because it is your own, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you've lifted it. You've got the inspiration from somewhere else, but you're certainly not relying on just their expertise. You've got to put a little bit of yourself in there too.
Yeah. And well, let me just get to the point I probably should have done first, which is I did a bit of research on you, Ian, as I believe is the thing to do when you're having a conversation or an interview with someone. And I noticed on LinkedIn you describe yourself first and foremost as a writer, but you're also a podcast and a filmmaker. Can you tell just the folks at home a little bit about yourself?
Well, yeah, I truly believe that I am a writer before I'm anything else. I've been a writer for over 30 years. I started in advertising and marketing and public relations, and I did that for many, many years. And then I just broke away from that and did freelance writing, which I still do to this day, bits and pieces here and there, because, you got to pay the rent. And I wrote for newspaper and magazine, mostly nature and wildlife, a little bit of science, a little bit of sports. Do like my sports. And then I wrote a few novels that didn't really go anywhere. I had a publisher, and that didn't work out. But I've always been fascinated by film, loved it, wanted to write screenplays. And sometime in the 80s, I picked up Sid Field's Screenwriters Workbook. And something that I want to let people know out there, that don't listen to other people in your life who are knocking you about what you want to do. Because at the time that I picked up that book, somebody in my life was telling me, that's stupid. That's a waste of time. Don't waste your time with that stuff. It's silly. And I listened to them. And for years, I didn't write a screenplay. I read that book like 6 times in a row, but I didn't write anything. And then I had someone come along in my life who looked at the book and said, have you written one of these? And said to me 2 words that changed my life. And they said, why not? I said, why not? And then I started writing screenplays, and now I'm at the point where I'm funding my at least I'm looking for funds for my first feature film. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. And I've been following that journey because you talk about it now and again, and give out great advice as well. I have to say you've done a few mini episodes which are excellent, where you talk about where you're at and what your thoughts are on. I might be getting a little bit confused here because I speak to you quite often as well, and I'm wondering if I'm getting some of what we've discussed off podcast with what you're talking about on podcast. And just about your podcast, it's the How They Did It Filmmaking podcast. I've listened to all but I think 2 episodes, and it's a great show. I have given you the odd shout out on social media and stuff, so people listening might be aware of it, but it's a really great show where you're finding creative filmmakers and interviewing them. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it started because, and again, and I mentioned this to you off air, that I'm not completely altruistic. I mean, I do want to help people. That's first and foremost, but I kind of like helping myself too, because I'm learning just like everybody else is. And that's where the podcast started. I was at a point where I wanted to learn all there was to learn about filmmaking. And I thought, well, what's the best way to do that? And one of the things I've always been told is that you learn from your mistakes. And I thought, well, can you learn from someone else's mistakes? So there was born this podcast of how somebody else did it. Yeah. Can we tap into what they've done in order to be successful? And I've talked to a lot of filmmakers, and, I've learned a lot along the way. And I'm glad to hear you say that you've listened to them all, because thank you very much for doing that, because I know how hard it is you've got a lot of choices for your free time. And for someone to listen to the podcast, it's tremendous. It means a lot to me. So thanks a lot, Carter. I really appreciate that.
And the same, I would say about one.
Well, I hope you've learned something. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the thing, the podcast is to share information about filmmaking and make that journey a little easier for other people.
And it does work that because obviously when I'm listening to these people, I'm learning from them as well. And I have to agree with you as a podcaster myself, when I'm researching these episodes, and you've helped me with one of the upcoming episodes that's coming up. I've got I've not told, I think, the audience what's going on, but a few of the episodes that are coming up in season 4, I've had people researching for me. So you probably agree with me that when you're researching it, although you're condensing the information that you find, you're constantly learning new things, which maybe you can't deliver every single point of to the audience, and that's really valuable too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, because, you don't want, for my podcast, and to be honest with you, I try not to put a time limit on my podcast. If I'm having an interesting conversation with a guest, I let them go. Like if they're willing to tell me everything there is about filmmaking, I had an hour and a half conversation with Ian Diaz about just the nuggets of filmmaking, and he had all this information, and it's like, I'm gonna mine that rock. I'm just gonna let him go. But you're right. There are times where you have to say, okay, I've done a lot of research on this person and they've given me a lot of information, but some of it, it's just like, okay, now we're getting too heavy. Maybe people aren't going to retain everything that is in the episode. So you have to be careful about how long that goes. But that doesn't mean I can't keep it. I can't learn from it, So you're right. You learn from everything you're doing. And you're right. The episode that you had me do for you, the research, it's endless. You could just go down this rabbit hole of learning and just keep going and going and going.
Yeah, it's so valuable though to know the extra stuff. I do. Obviously, I try and deliver the best episodes I can, but you just have to cut some stuff out. As you mentioned, that rabbit hole, you can end up going way off topic, which might be interesting, but I keep having to pull it back to to productivity, and now success, this new thing. I wanted to talk about success, and I felt that I had to kind of change the title of the show to make that work, so hopefully it will.
I think it does. I mean, because everything that you talk about, to be honest with you, when I listen to your show, everything should lead someone to success.
Yes.
I mean, so why not add that to the title? I think it's perfect. I think you made a good choice.
So today we're going to be talking about creative projects, but part of creative projects, the creative projects that we do, which are the less enjoyable parts, perhaps, the nuts and bolts of putting things together. And obviously, I think if we talk just briefly, Ian, about the nuts and bolts of putting a podcast together, because of this baker analogy that I used a couple of episodes ago, where I was comparing creative people who make a creative project to a baker baking a cake, and they put their time and their energy and their effort and their creative thoughts into this, and they make a beautiful cake and it tastes fantastic. But that is not the business part of the baker's job. The baker's business is the selling of that cake, the marketing of that cake, the getting the ingredients together, the getting the deliveries, the coordinating people to bring things to him and to deliver his product out there. And that compares very directly to trying to sell a creative project, whether it's a film, a podcast, or a theatre show, a piece of art, whatever that might be. And so it's the nuts and bolts I'd like to get into today. Would you like to tell me what's involved in putting a show together for you?
Well, the first thing I need is a guest. Unlike yourself, you do these great shows where you do them by yourself, and you impart this information on your own, the solo episodes, and I hate them. I'm so bad at them.
You're
much
not,
rather
by the way. You're good. You've got a few 9-10 minuters, and I've listened to them, and they're good. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, how about this? I don't feel comfortable with them. How's that sound?
Okay.
I'm much more comfortable like this. You and I having a conversation. This is great to me. I just love this because it's two people instead of having all the pressure on one. And so for me, it's finding a guest. And right now, because I'm so busy sort of trying to raise funds for my film, my show is, I haven't done a weekly show. I'm doing them whenever I get a chance. And what's really interesting is that people are starting to reach out to me and pitch me on why they should be on the show. Yeah. And I love that. I think that's great. That's, the fact that people are finding me in a sea of filmmaking podcasts is fantastic. But that's where everything starts. It's like, who can I get to talk about filmmaking, and why would people be interested in hearing from them? That's where it starts. That's exactly where it starts. And
then are you trying to coordinate them to meet you online at a specific time? And
you know what? It's what's really weird is that once I nail down a guest, and all I do is send an email or a message of some kind. I contact them. Sometimes it's through Facebook, sometimes it's through Twitter, but it's a personal message. And what's really interesting is that I have never had anybody turn me down, and it's really easy to get people to commit to a time. I leave it up to them. I give them my schedule. I'll say I'm free on this date, this date, this date, this date. Here's the times that I'm good, and then they pick one. And they're usually really good about it, and bang, we're good to go. But before that happens, I still have to come up with questions. Now, not everybody does this, but for me, I like to give the person that I'm interviewing a list of questions, not weeks in advance. I'll give them the day before or the day of, so they get an idea of what I'm going to be asking them. And the reason that I put questions together, I like to have a flow that goes through. Like, yes, there's tangents that happen and you go off topic, and I usually let those happen because there's nuggets that come out of there. But I like to have something to bring me back. Yeah. So there's always a next question that I can ask. So the next thing that I do is that I put these questions together. Now that means I have to research them. I have to watch their projects. If it's a series, like I did Ren, the Girl with the Mark recently.
Yeah.
And I watched that series, which was wonderful. I'm glad I got to watch it. I thought it was great. But that will give me the impetus to write these questions that I know the answers to which will help people who are listening. So that's the next step. And that doesn't take, well, that can take a couple of days. It depends on how much research I have to do, what I have to watch, because sometimes they have more than one project, and sometimes I have to read a book. I've done some authors on my show as well. So I have to, again, find questions that I think are going to be pertinent to those who are listening. And that just takes up a lot of time. And then it's just the call. And then we have our interview.
So that's the cake. So what do you do with your cake?
That's the cake. The cake is fun.
The cake is fine. It tastes lovely, folks. Have a listen.
It is fun to do. That is the easy, fun part. But then you've got to sell that cake.
Yeah.
Oh, man, is that hard.
Well, you mentioned it earlier, the white noise of podcasts. I mean, I know there's literally millions of podcasts, but at any one time, actively, I believe it's 700,000. I read that online somewhere that are available. So that figure could be wrong. Don't believe everything you read on the internet, as they say. But if it's 700,000 or if it's 2 million, it's still a lot of white noise for you to cut through. And just on what you've said already, there's a couple of productivity things that you're doing that you're probably aware of, in that you've systemized how you find your people and how you get ready for your interview. So it sounds like you're all over how you put your show together. And I'd say that most creative people that create things are, unless they're being experimental with the way they work, are all over how they put something together.
Right.
So we're now at the point where no matter what it is, whatever our cake is, we're trying to get it out there. And so what do you... Just one other thing, actually, that you mentioned there as well. You're saying that you're just putting them out randomly now, and I noticed that they're coming out a little bit more randomly. Have you considered putting your show out in seasons like I do? Because the seasons just guarantee you a good few months off.
You know what? It's funny because I took... Like, I always take time around Christmas. I take weeks off at Christmas because I need a break. Because besides the podcast, I'm doing other things. So you want a break. But I have thought about seasons, and I haven't done it yet. I don't know why. In fact, I should probably maybe do a couple more and then just say, okay, I'm taking 2 months off and I'll come back in 2 months. And then I can take at least a month and just collect myself. And then in another month, in that second month, I can start putting people together and putting shows together. And then I can even record them if I want and be ready rather than doing it week to week. Because a lot of the times that's what I do. It's like, especially when I'm doing them every week, I record one each week. Yeah. And it just, I don't know if that's the smartest way to do it. I think...
Productivity would say the smartest way to do it is to batch record, which is to try and get all your stuff running, like do all your recordings maybe in 1 week or 2 weeks and then release them over, say, 12. I do a 12-week season. So it would say, it's not say it's easy to do it that way, but if you can get your mind focused on that one thing just for 2 weeks, that you would be able to do it more quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, and the fact that people don't normally have a problem with scheduling. I've never really had a problem with scheduling. The only time I've had a problem with scheduling is when I talk to people in places like South Africa or in Australia, things like that. Then we have some issues. We have to work things out. But you're right. If because people aren't normally putting up blocks about when they can record, I could do 2 weeks of recording and then just sit back. And put them out one a week. You're right. So you load it up on the front end, and then you sail through the back end. See, they're learning something already.
Well, I just have to do it that way because I don't know how people can put them out each week. I know that some people that put them out each week have actually several people behind the scenes helping them to do that. That would be the bigger, higher profile celebrity style podcasters. But for me, it takes me just forever to put together one episode, so I couldn't you know, especially if I was working simultaneously, I just couldn't guarantee I could put them out each week. But
right.
And even the kind of 12, last season was 18, which I think is a great season, but it was a killer. But the 12, hopefully I'll have 12 done by the time season 4 launches, which I think is the 29th of March. And I'm so basically all through March I'm going to be recording, and I've kind of systemized what I'm doing with that, in that I'm going to have 4 interviews, and it'll be interesting to see how much less work is involved in the interviews for me as compared to the other ones. And I've got, as you know, 4 shows which I've had creators working with me on, and I've got 4 of my own shows. So I'm doing a little bit of a test in season 4 to see if I can make my life a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I can be honest with you. I after seeing how you do your shows, because when I wrote that one for you, you gave me great examples and you walked me through exactly what you were looking for. So I know what goes into to putting your show together, and it's a lot more. Even when I do a solo episode, I'll do a one-word note that I'll then expand. So I try not to do a script. I try to sort of wing it. And so even my solo episodes are nothing like you. It's a heavy workload. So when it comes to interviews, I think you're going to find them a bit of a vacation for yourself.
I really hope so, because I can't keep it up. Last week, I don't know if it was the weather or what, but I was very much of a mind of season 4 will be my last season, and I'm really hoping that these interviews will make my life a little bit easier. You know, productivity, it's all very well to know techniques and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, you've got to put the work in, and it's the time it takes to just do the basic work for my show that's definitely becoming a problem.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And that, for you, your recipe for baking your cake is far more complicated than mine.
Yeah, I'm like that. I'm an idiot.
No. You've chosen this path, and you know how to make your cake, though. That's the thing. You definitely know how to make your cake, and it's enjoyable for you. It's hard work, but the result is really good. Yeah. And then you have the same problem that everybody else has. Which you got to take that cake and get it out to market.
Yep. So tell me what you would do for us for one show, just to market that one.
I'm pretty bad. I mean, I don't do email. I put it on my Facebook page, the Facebook page for my show. I hit up Instagram. I hit up Twitter. So I put it on all of those, and I constantly hit up Twitter throughout the week that it's on, the new episode.
How constantly? How often?
Once a day for me. That's it. And then what I usually do, I belong to a lot of filmmaking pages, or I don't even know what to call them on Facebook.
Groups.
What's that?
Groups.
Yes. So what I'll do is I will go on every one of those groups and plug my show. And that, to be honest with you, doubles my listenership. A lot of people in there. So I try my best to get onto as many groups as I can. And here's the thing. The problem with getting on groups is that I don't want to just spam. I don't want to just, here I am. This is the only reason I'm here is for my show. So I try very hard to stay active in those groups. Yeah. So now my workload for getting the cake out to market has quadrupled, because I'm trying to stay active in all of these groups to prove that I'm worthy of being in these groups for more than just marketing. Yeah. That takes a lot of time too. So I think I might have to cut that back a little bit.
Yeah, is another way of looking at that though, because I totally accept what you're saying. In fact, you helped me by telling me about a few groups, and I have joined groups and tried to interact a little bit with them as well, but I haven't yet had anything to promote, because it's been in my between seasons. This is another in-between episode that we're doing just now. But I will be doing what you're suggesting. But is it worth considering that maybe you don't have to interact so much, because what you're giving back to that group is your episode? Is that maybe something you could do in your head?
You know what? I think that's right. And I am pulling back a little bit, because I haven't done as many episodes as I should. And you're right. I see that what I'm giving them is a chance to learn from the episode. Yes. So I am giving back in a way. So yeah, I'll be pulling back on that for sure. And I've had to be honest with you, just because of my workload. So things have been a little crazy. So
yeah, my workload's been pretty crazy. It always is slightly crazy. Either I'm on my own projects or I'm doing a stupid amount of fights. And that's, I think, one problem I had last season when I was doing the 18 shows that I thought were going to be 10 minutes long and ended up being massive. Although it's a great season, I didn't have any time to market that. The simple things that I do to market the show are I create an image, which is a quote from the episode.
right.
I create a video using the Headliner, free Headliner service, where I'd get an audio quote from the show, and I make a little video which is less than 1 minute long, and I put that out on all the social networks. And I've got a good following on Twitter, specifically in both my accounts, and people help me to promote it there. But that's really all I was able to do last season. And when in my assessment of it, and again, another big productivity thing is self-assessment and having honesty, that I can honestly say that although I've got some great people on social networking and they're great to interact with, they are already listening to the show. They're not new listeners. And although they're promoting to the same group of people each time. And really the listeners, I think, that come from social networking have leveled off. And they've leveled off really, really lowly. I've mentioned this figure so many times, but it's less than less than 0.5%. I think it's more like 0.4% of my Twitter followers actually listening to the show despite my efforts. And you mentioned email earlier. I've been listening to podcasts on marketing, and apparently the valuable thing we should all be doing with these projects are building email lists, because they are far more effective than social networking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to do those Headliner things, and I haven't done them in a while. So you've reminded me to do those, and I have to do them. I meant to ask you, and this is something that I think people use in crowdfunding, but they use people as evangelicals almost, and they choose these people who go out and will talk about the show and get new listeners. You know what I mean?
It's kind of a mini mastermind group to promote, doesn't it?
Yeah. Have you thought about something like that? Are you trying to tap into some people who can do that for you? Because I certainly do that for you. I mean, every chance I get, I talk about your show. So I don't know if that helps, though.
I think it can help if it's in the right place. I've got people that, I've maybe got 10 people that on the social network, and when something comes up, they will retweet what's going out there. But again, what I'd say is they're retweeting within the same group each time, and the same group is kind of ignoring that stuff. But what I find valuable about the social element is the interaction with these people and talking about stuff, and I like to get messages, and I do sometimes get reviews. I try to give people reviews back if it's another podcast that's promoting me, and there's the Filmmakers podcast, your podcast, my podcast, and a couple of others that are filmmakers. We do retweet within our own groups, but what I try to avoid, I did join one once, the Filmmakers podcast. Giles invited me to a group of podcasters that were promoting each other's podcasts, but what I found with that is that we were supposed to be retweeting each other's content, and the reality was that most of the people that are that listen to my show or that follow me are interested in different things than these other groups are about, and it was kind of like an echo chamber to the same group of people who weren't interested each time. So that kind of, I can see that might work for some people that had maybe a more general content, but I think the more valuable thing that happens is your podcast, social networking, mine, the Filmmakers podcast, and I think Gary's got one, the Real Filthy podcast, and there's a couple of others. Us retweeting is more valuable than just general retweeting, because we're retweeting to people who are already listening to podcasts, and they're already listening to podcasts in a similar vein to our own. Right.
So that gives us a leg up. We might get more listeners that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not to dismiss what people are doing. You obviously do pick up occasional listeners just from the retweets and stuff like that, but it's when you honestly assess how things are going, they're not going that well.
Yeah, you know what? Here's the thing. Like, I just did that. I can't remember her name, but I did Ren, the girl with the mark.
Yes, it's Kate Madison.
Kate Madison. Kate's wonderful. And she reached out to me and wanted to be on the show. And in her pitch to me, she said, my show, my series has had 8 million views. Now you can imagine how excited I was to get somebody on my show who has 8 million views. Mm-hmm. The listenership, I've had 150 people listen to that episode. So I don't know what I can do when I've got somebody who's promoting, and she promoted the show. She promoted the episode. But I don't know what I can do to crack that 8 million people. Nobody, I was surprised that it was so low. It was so low. Yeah. So, and I did everything that I usually do, and maybe I should be doing more, but it was disheartening. It's disheartening to hear how low some of these episodes are.
I get what you're saying, because my figures are just slightly higher than that generally, but only very slightly, and they don't. What I find is they increase the more episodes you put out. I think the more mature your podcast is, the more faith people have in listening to it, and It seems that more people listen to the show the more episodes. Obviously, the more episodes you've got, the more downloads you get anyway. But I think that hanging on in there, even if you're doing it seasonally like I'm doing, it might not be the trick to this, along with as much effort as you can put in elsewhere. And although we're talking about podcasts, I think finding an audience for anything has got to tactically think about how you can reach your audience and how you can convert that reach into actual listens of your show or watches of your YouTube video or votes or whatever you're trying to gather.
Yeah, well, and to be honest with you, I'm also doing that for my film.
Well, that's good. That's good. I wanted to move on to that anyway. So tell us where you're at with the film and where you plan to go with it. And I've read the script, incidentally, and it's awesome.
Yes, yeah. Thank you very much for doing that. I had a select. I don't want to say few. I had quite a few people that I think I had 6 readers that were important to me that I needed. I needed people to be tactfully honest. Let's put it that way. I didn't need people patting me on the back saying, "Oh, this is wonderful. You're fantastic." That's not what you want from a reader of your script. You want someone who's going to tell you what's wrong with the script. But they'll do it tactfully, like you did. So I went through that process. I've got my script down. And right now, I am raising funds. And you talk about the baking of the cake and all the ingredients that go into that. Some of the ingredients that go into baking this cake are not fun. Yeah. Writing a business plan sucks, but I did, which maps out everything about the film. But I'm using that and some other methods to. I do a teaser. I have a teaser that I put together for the film as well. Good. And I'm using that to raise funds. And this is the taking the cake to market when it comes to filmmaking, and it is the most brutal part of filmmaking. It's so difficult.
I've done it. I know what you mean.
It's horrible. It is absolutely horrible. Now, the budget of my film is $110,000 Canadian dollars. Yeah. So I don't know, like 80,000 American. I don't know what that would be in British pounds.
I'd have to look it up. Actually, yeah, I owe you some money for the work you did for me, so I'm going to have to look it up and get you the right money.
No, you don't owe me any money. No, I'm not. I did that for gratis.
We shall see.
No. Yeah, let's not argue on your podcast about whether you're paying me or not. You're not. I did that because
I just had a mental note, Ian, that I must mention that I've not paid you yet, and I've accidentally said it on air. I should probably have said it off air.
No, listen, that's okay. So yeah,
can I ask you one question? Sorry, before you go on, you springboarded into this via Shoot from the Heart. Can you tell me how that came about and how it led to you actually committing to this?
That was really interesting because it was your fault. I asked you one of the questions. I can't remember which question it was.
It was the advice, I think. For what advice would you have for other filmmakers?
And you said to me, "Shoot from the Heart," and you said, "I haven't read the book, but it's the title of this book by Diane Bell." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll have to look at this book." So I checked out the book and I liked it, and I thought I'm gonna order it. And I read the book, and then I got Diane on the show, and we talked about the book, and then it lit a fire in me, and I thought, I can do this. I can actually make my own film, and that's how the whole thing started, from that question that you answered, and it led me to right now. Right now, I'm knocking on businesses' doors, and I'm trying to get money out of businesses to. I can either put them in the film, or I will certainly put them under a special thank you with their logo at the end of the film in the credits.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at right now, and I've gone through all my sort of personal list of people that I wanted to ask for money, and you hear no a lot, which I used to hear when I'm a writer, so I hear no all the time. It was just, it can be disheartening. You just have to keep telling yourself you can do this. Just keep moving forward. And it's something Diane Bell has said, which I totally agree with, is that you have to do something every day to move yourself closer to your goal.
Yes.
And I think that's probably right up your alley as well, right?
Absolutely. This is the trying to avoid, although you have to have a goal to aim for,
right,
and avoiding end goal thinking and just thinking of that end goal is what you need to do. You need to be thinking day to day, what can you do to incrementally bring you closer? And is that what I've got the book. I haven't opened it up yet because I've got so many productivity books and stuff to read, and filmmaking is kind of secondary to what I'm doing at the moment. What steps did Diane recommend to get you to where you're at the moment and where you're going?
It starts with the script. You have to have a solid script. And not just from Diane, that's coming from me. Your script has to be polished until it's blinding, because you don't want to show a script to a potential investor that has spelling mistakes in it or is not engaging. Yeah. Like, it has to be a really great story. It has to shine. No mistakes in it. Oh my God, please don't send anything out with spelling errors, grammatical errors, punctuation errors. Please don't do that. It's so amateurish. You can't. So that's where it starts. And from there, once you pass it through and this is, I've been writing for years. So, she didn't have to tell me that part of it, but you find your readers, and you get some critiques back, and you make the changes, you make things shine, you have a great story. One of the things that I think, I'm not sure she really touched on it, but you should think about the things you have available to you before you write your script. So, what cameras do you have? What, the people that you can use, location, props, anything that you might have that you can use in your film to help keep the budget down.
Yeah,
is something that I think you should consider.
Which is
she didn't talk about that.
This is the Robert Rodriguez shoot with what you've got kind of.
Yeah, absolutely, attitude. Absolutely. And I think it's.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think I mentioned this in a couple of episodes ago, but I've kind of converted that in my mind to start with what you've got. Mm-hmm. But shoot with what you've got very specifically for a film, as if you've got access to farm machinery. Write a scene that's got a tractor in it, it adds dollar value in front of the camera.
Exactly.
But if you start, I started saying start with what you've got, because you can always, because I think people were frightened to spend money on new equipment and stuff like that. If you've got the money and you can afford to buy a new piece of equipment or whatever that's going to make your life easier, like I've bought a desk to record this episode. It just makes my life easier, and I was able to do it effectively with no great loss of money. Then do that. But shoot with what you've got is just a great attitude. Sorry for interrupting. Carry on.
No, that's, you know what, and again, this wasn't really out of Diane's book, but it's something that I truly believe in, is that you have to really consider, because it'll help you keep your budget in check. One of the things that Diane talks about in her book is that she wants everybody to get paid, and I'm with her on this, because I've done short films where I give people an honorarium, I give them $100 here or there, and people aren't really getting paid. And I wanted to set up a project where if I'm doing a feature film, I want everybody to get paid something. I mean, it's not going to be like, this is a micro budget film, so it's not going to, you're not going to break the bank on this, folks, but I want people to get something. So that's something that she talks about in her book. And the next step that she wants you to do is to find a line producer, the person that will take care of the nuts and bolts of your film. And by that, she means your budget and your schedule. You know, you need a schedule in order to write that budget, to have a clear budget in mind. And you want a good budget because you don't want any surprises along the way.
Yeah, a realistic budget.
Exactly. So, you know, I've gone through my budget with my line producer several times, and we've knocked it down and knocked it down and knocked it down. And now we're at a point, it's at, as I said, 110,000. And we're at the point now where this is it. It's what we're comfortable with. It's what we can do. There will be no surprises. This is it. So I can also show this to potential investors and say, this is where your money's going. This is exactly how we're spending it. This is what you can expect. And there are no surprises for them. So that's the next thing. And then she wants you to get a cinematographer and editor along the way. I've got my cinematographer, but I don't have an editor. So I did that. And then you hire your key cast and crew. And I guess that's your cinematographer and editor, part of that. For me, I went through the audition process, and you talk about being prepared. Wow, there's a lot that goes into, because on my short films, it was all send me your reel, I'll take a look, and then I chose my actors based on their reel. But for this one, I did live auditions, which I had never done before. So I read up on auditions, I watched videos on how to do successful auditions. I had a lot of help from my line producer. My line producer couldn't make the second round, so I had my wife help me with that. She's going to be the executive producer on my film just because she does everything. She helps out so much. So I went through that. Once you get all that, then she wants you to do a concept trailer. Now, I didn't do a concept trailer. I just did a teaser. Mm-hmm. And if you were to go to the Facebook page for my film, it's at The Closet Movie on Facebook. Make sure you have the sound up, because right at the top is the teaser. So people can see the teaser for the film. So I did a teaser. So I had to organize all that and get the actors to come to my house. We did a photo shoot. My daughter's a photographer, so I got her to do a photo shoot with two of my main actors for the movie poster. Yeah, good. Then I got one of my actors has a friend who does movie posters and such, and so they did a little work on it for me and made it look a little better. So I had that in the bank. And then once you get all that, then it's time to go out and get money. And what Diane talks about is sort of putting a list together of, I don't know rich people. I don't. And all I do is make a list of people that I think would be interested in investing in the film. Mm-hmm. I set a certain amount per share. Well, the other thing I had to do before I did that, by the way, was the legal stuff. And that's where you came in too. Yeah. You gave me one of your, I can't remember agreements. What you said. Yeah, it was an investor agreement. I got one from you. I got one from a friend in the States, and I had another one. And my wife took them all and amalgamated them into a Canadian version. Yeah. And then I have a friend who's a lawyer, and I passed it to her. And for a couple of bottles of wine, she went over it and made some corrections. Good. So that's how I got my investor agreement. And then I went out looking for money. Oh, no. Then I had to set up my corporation, because the film has to be, now in the UK, you can have an LLC. So your film can be an LLC. But here in Canada, it has to be an incorporation. So I had to incorporate the film. So there was that expense as well. Once I did that, then I opened up a bank account so that I could put the money into that bank account, which I have to make a run to the bank today. Thank you very much for reminding me. Then you go out and you look for money. Yeah. And that, and to be honest with you, the legal side of things was a real pain in the butt. That was hard.
I remember at the time it slowed you down so much that I think it threw off your schedule a bit, didn't it?
It did. It totally threw off my schedule. But once I got back on track, I still had to change my start date. I was going to start shooting in May, but now I'm shooting in August. And that may even change to September because of being able to rent a location that I need off season. So that may change too. So that's the position I'm in now. I'm going through this list of people that I've made that I know, and I'm asking them if they, if you're interested in talking about getting involved with the film, and then we have a conversation, and you just sort of take it from there. And it is the hardest thing. And that's not even the selling of the film, because once the film is made, then you've got to find an audience for that film. But that's what I'm doing right now. That's one of the things I have to say.
But what you're doing right now as well, with the lawyer thing was a big blip, I know. But if you hadn't got your agreements sorted out, that's one agreement for the investors, but you'll have other agreements for actors and crew, etc.
That's true.
If you don't do that, you're in big trouble right away. And I know filmmakers that are making feature films right now who admit to me that they haven't done any of that, and I just think you're in massive trouble already. But then you can go too far into that. I think the way you amalgamated contracts and showed it to a lawyer for a couple of bottles of wine is the right way to go. When we made our film, we were at 11,000 in legal fees, and I'm not saying we got robbed. I think what happened is we were so frightened of that kind of contractual side that we just got into an agreement with a great lawyer, and they didn't scam us. It's just that we agreed to it, and we ended up paying a lot of money out, but that meant that everything was kind of still solid at the other end when you're trying to get an audience and trying to sell it on and stuff. And just a couple of other things you said in there, just sorry for interrupting, is I think you did the right thing in auditioning actors for this. I got pretty lucky with Fast Romance when I did it, and I knew a lot of actors, but the one or two people were suggested that didn't come to mind right away, and they just worked out to be the right people for the job. But I think auditioning actors, even if you've got a slight fear of it, is definitely the right way to go ahead, because you can form opinions in your mind how the characters are going to interact together. And even in some audition scenarios, you can actually put two actors in the same room together auditioning and just see how their chemistry is before you commit to a 6-week shoot or whatever with them.
That's exactly what I did. The first round was individuals. Yeah. And so I saw a lot of people. And then I narrowed that down to 3 each. There were 3 roles that I was auditioning, and I narrowed that down to 3 people per role. Yeah. And then I started mixing and matching them. Mm-hmm. And I looked at not only their individual performance, but how they performed with other people, and that kind of chemistry, because I think chemistry is so important. Yeah. And it was so much easier to make a decision once I'd seen people work together. And I think that was probably the smartest way to go, because if I had done the traditional thing that I usually did, which was, just show me your reel and I'll pick people, I wouldn't have got that chemistry, right? I need that chemistry. Yeah. And it really does help. It really does help. And I had a fear. I had a fear of it because I'd never done it before. I don't think I'll have that fear again, because I still have plenty of people that I have to audition for. But I don't think I'll have that fear again. And a lot of it was price too. Like that, I had to rent a location in order to get my actors there, and that was another problem. There's just, you're gonna have to outlay some cash. Yeah. To do a film. Make sure you have, I would say, safely put about $5,000 together before you start into the process, because and that's before legal fees. Like, I lucked out with the legal fee. I really did, because I looked at all kinds. I looked at entertainment lawyers and lawyers of all types, and the prices just were crazy. Yeah. $12,000, $14,000, and I thought, I don't have $14,000. I can't do this. It's impossible for me to do. So that's when I started to panic a little bit and started to ask people, hey, how do you do it? And how did you do it? And hey, Carter, how did you do it? Yeah. So
But these legal fees and these are from kind of a different era. Filmmaking has changed now. It has become
totally.
cheaper to make things, and really it is within reach of anyone, as you've mentioned on your show many times, who's got a mobile phone that can film something now. So, you know, if you're making a low budget feature on mobile phones or on, you know, lower level DSLRs or whatever, which can still give great quality, you just can't be paying out 11 grand on legal fees when the entire budget for the entire feature is 10 grand.
Yeah, or a lot less. I mean, I've interviewed people who have done feature films for $500. I had one person who did a wonderful film, Bored in the USA, for $2,500. Just a lovely film, a lovely film. But again, he looked at what he had. He knew a lot of actors in the area because he was a comedian, so he had people that he could go to. He had locations that he could use. Yeah. Like he had people with cameras that were willing to help. So you have to look at that stuff too before you go into it and know. So if you want to do a low budget, like Alex Ferrari has that book out right now.
Yeah, FILMTREPRENEUR.
FILMTREPRENEUR. And I'm reading that one right now. I wish I had read that one before I started this film because I would have done it a lot differently. But I suggest that book for people. I think you should put that in your show notes because
it's awesome actually. Dave Bullis, the Dave Bullis podcast, his last ever show was an interview with Alex Ferrari, and they talked specifically about FILMTREPRENEUR, and it was such an amazing interview. I was telling people, listen to it now, because David Bullis, I think his show might still be up. I heard he was taking it down.
I think it is still up. You know,
he maybe just means that he's leaving it up till it runs out of, you know, however much he's paid in advance. But you know, I bought the FILMTREPRENEUR book for someone right away because I couldn't. The information that was coming across was so current and so vital for filmmakers that I had to kind of promote it as much as I could. But it's really, I think. Have you read that one as well? Did you say?
I'm halfway through it, and it's brilliant. Like you're right when you say current.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. It is so current. If you are a filmmaker listening to this right now, do yourself a favor and pick that book up. It really is current.
It's not the cheapest book in the world. I think it's something like £18 or £20 here in the UK.
You know,
but it's worth it.
I got an ebook. I got it as an ebook for $10.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to get it as an ebook, that'll save you some money.
Yeah.
But it's a good book. I would go to that.
I think it's a kind of must read for anyone planning to make kind of films right now, like in 2020. Yeah. It's the best one out there. I know there's millions of books on it, but it's so current. Now, see, I've only really garnered some information about it from online and from that interview and from buying the book for someone else and having a quick scan through it, but it's definitely a must read. Just one thing, something you mentioned earlier, just in case there's editors listening to this, you said you haven't got an editor yet. Would you like anyone that might hear this to get in touch?
Oh yeah. You know what, just go to I would go to the Facebook page and just drop me a line, or you can go to the website for my film, theclosetmovie.org.
Cool.
And you can drop me a message on there as well. And if you're an editor and you want to be involved, that's great. I'm not really sure why she wants an editor early.
It sounds like it's a creative team she's trying to build.
Yeah, trying to build that team. And I'm so keyed in on raising the funds right now that I'm forgetting about the other stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I should be building that team at the same time, but I'm so concerned about the funds. So I'm kind of letting everything else kind of sit for a little bit until I can get more funds behind me.
Yeah, I get it. That kind of worry about the kind of, that's a very nuts and boltsy thing that people would be worried about for sure. Yeah.
Can
I just ask you a question about people, about one of the episodes I'm going to be doing is Delegate This. I think it's probably towards the end of the season because I'm still putting delegation out and kind of assessing how it's going. How do you find working with people in this sort of nuts and bolts of putting together creative projects? Have you had trouble? Have you found good people, bad people? How's it work for you?
I had trouble at the beginning. I put out on Mandy.com for a line producer, and I got quite a few hits, and I'd reached out to some people, so I had choices, and I had this one person who had a lot of experience, and unfortunately she had gone into surgery, and so she needed 2 months to recover. And then I gave her something like a concept trailer that I was going to shoot. I gave her the script. She sat on that for a month, and I kept at her. And finally, she got back to me and said, well, here's what we're going to do, and started sort of dictating how we were going to proceed. I disagreed. It wasn't I just said, no, let's do it this way, and here's what we're going to do. And she quit. So I think this was somebody who wanted to be in charge, and I didn't see the signs.
Yeah.
So that put me way back.
Was that a potential hijacker, maybe?
I think for your definition of hijacker, I think it would be. I think she wanted to run the project and wasn't too happy when I pushed back. But it's, unfortunately, what people have to know is it's my project.
Yeah.
I'm more than willing to hear out anybody for any suggestions. This is a team effort, no question. But the final decision has to rest with one person, and they have to understand that person is me. So this is someone who couldn't deal with that, and that's fine.
Yeah,
so I found somebody else.
Yeah, to some extent, I would prefer that. Sometimes you get people that are half committing to something or not giving you a definitive answer, and then you can spend months dealing with somebody who you actually, in the end, you have to kind of lean against the wall and say, are you involved or are you not? And only at that last gasp, through politeness or whatever other reason they've got going on, will they actually say, no, I'm not in.
Yeah, exactly. If you push them and say, what's going on, they're more than likely they're going to back off and say, I don't want to be part of this for whatever reason. And here's the thing too. And as much as that put me behind, I'd rather have found out that person wasn't right for the project than continued on with that person anyway.
Totally.
So I got people that I'm working with now who, and to be honest with you, their role at this point is kind of silent because I'm out raising the funds anyway. So there's not much for them to do at this point. As I said, I went to my line producer. We hammered out a schedule and a budget. But at this point, that's all we can do. It's raising the funds. So, but you're right. It's funny, with all the questions that I ask people, one of the answers that I get a lot about the lesson learned, what's the biggest mistake they've made, is they've chosen the wrong people to work with.
Yeah.
And you have to really trust the people that you're working with, and that you have to put a lot of thought into who you're going to work with. And I think that's something that I've taken from my podcast in talking to people, and I'm carrying that with me because it's such a team effort. It is vitally important to get the right people.
Yeah,
vitally important.
And I'd agree with that. In fact, it's something that came up in the Law of Success in 16 Lessons. The very first lesson was about mastermind groups, and it's something that's been on my mind this year. In fact, on my whiteboards, I like my whiteboards, every month I've written, learn more about mastermind groups. And I think what you're trying to put together is a group of minds that for a limited time, say from 4 months of pre-production into a bit of post-production through the shoot, are all going to be working towards the same goal, with the same sense of focus without being distracted by anything. Is that the perfect group that you're trying to create, would you say?
You know what? Wouldn't that be perfect?
Yeah.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? And to some extent, I've gotten a lot of feedback from them on certain things. And because the recipe for the cake, if we go back to that, is that you don't bring all the ingredients. On a film, other people bring the ingredients that they add to the cake. So as long as they're not putting in vinegar when it should be sugar, you're going to do okay. And sometimes you have to compromise. Like, let's be honest. I don't think you're going to get the perfect group of people. There's going to be times when you tussle. But as long as everybody knows the end goal, you're okay. And you have to make sure that is clear from the very beginning.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing. This is what we want to accomplish. here's who's in charge. Everything goes through this person. Bang, we're good.
Well, I've found over the years that with creative people, you can sometimes get kind of slightly volatile personalities in there. But the point you're making there is Napoleon Hill's point that a mastermind group must move forward in harmony of purpose and effort. And that harmony is what needs to be achieved. And I think it is achievable. It doesn't have to be achieved for 3 years. It just needs to be achieved for certain people for the few weeks that you're shooting or for the one day that they're on set with you. In fact, a friend of mine, we had to move out of an office. The chap was Ross that I was sharing an office with wasn't so well, and we had to move his gear out of the office because he couldn't get to the office or use it. And we got a few of his friends together. And in one day, in fact, it was one session of 3 hours, we moved everything from his office to another office.
Wow.
Done. In that 3 hours, these 5 people who never worked together before worked in harmony of purpose and effort to move one lot of stuff to another, to 3 miles away in one van, and it was over. So that harmony of purpose doesn't have to be 10 years you've got to commit to each other. It just needs to be for a very short period of time sometimes.
Yeah, but here's the thing: there still has to be somebody who's at the helm, saying this, and this, and that can be the sort of trigger for some problems, because not everybody wants to listen to the one person. Well, my ideas are better than yours, and you get into that kind of crap. But you know what? I like the idea. You're right. There's a limited time, because once the shoot is over, then you've got certain people that you've dealt with. Yep. And then you come on to post-production, you've got certain people that you have to deal with. And then post-production's done. And then you have to go on to selling the film, and that is pretty much yourself.
Yeah, but that selling the film could be another team. It doesn't. I'm sure certain members of the original team will still be there. Yourself, for example, leading the way. But you can have a separate team selling the film who might begin working on the selling of the film while you're shooting. That would be somebody putting together a press pack of. It would be photographers perhaps as well, and it would be somebody perhaps shooting behind the scenes stuff for you. That all becomes valuable in the selling and promotion of your product after the film, but it's a different team perhaps than the other team. Not perhaps, I think it definitely is.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It goes in these modules, doesn't it? You go into these phases. So yeah, you'll go from one to the next, and you hope that everybody's going to work together. But that is the worry, right? You're worried that you're not going to have that gelling that you want.
Yeah.
So that's a difficult thing to achieve. But like you said, I mean, if 5 guys who never worked together before can clean out an office and not come to blows, you've got hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was all done with goodwill and friendship. So that can pay off. But I think we've kind of covered a lot today, so I want to kind of start rounding things up. This has been really, really valuable, Ian. I was a little bit frightened going into this, but I think we've got hopefully some good stuff in there.
I hope so too.
I would never dare to ask you your own 3 questions back, but I thought I'd nab your styling a little bit. So I've got a few questions for you, if you wouldn't mind giving me a few more minutes of your time.
Absolutely.
What do you, I mean, it's a standard kind of question I hear in these shows a lot, but what do you wish you had known when you'd started out?
Oh, boy.
In podcasting or filmmaking, whatever.
Yeah, I think in podcasting, I wish I had known just how difficult getting the audience was going to be. I don't want to say that I have this giant ego, because I certainly don't. I knew I was going to have to mine an audience, but I didn't think I'd have to mine so deep and hard. It's very difficult. If I had known beforehand, I might have done more prep work before I started the podcast to mine that audience. So that's what I would say. I wish I had known how difficult getting an audience was going to be.
I think that could be said for any creative project, actually. So
yeah,
I think you're onto something there.
You know what? That could actually go to the film as well, because it's really hard to find people who are interested in it now on the aspect of contributing financially, but it's also hard to get that audience that I can then depend on to buy or rent the film or go see it in a theater when the film is done.
Yeah.
So you're right. It applies to both.
But
it
this
really
is another real nuts and bolts thing that people should be thinking of. I mean, I've got 2 Udemy courses I've signed up for, which are both for marketing, and I've started listening to 2 marketing podcasts. I'm not listening to filmmaking podcasts other than your own, and little dips into Gelsy's and Gary's shows and a couple of others, because I don't have the time to let my focus go into filmmaking. I will go back to them, but my focus is I need to learn as much about marketing now as possible.
Yeah, do it, man.
Next up, what productivity or time management technique do you find the most useful in your day-to-day life or work?
You know what? I've got you to thank for this, and I've probably told you this, but the 5-second rule has changed my life. And it changed my life because I'm like everybody else. I would sit there and say, oh, can I do that? Should I call that person? Should I contact that person? Would they really want to talk to me? Well, that's just nonsense. In the first 5 seconds, if I get an idea to contact, Carter about his ideas for filmmaking, I'm doing it within the first 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, my brain is going to hit the brakes and find all kinds of excuses to not do that. So when I'm talking about raising funds for my film, I have gone to people, and I cannot wait more than 5 seconds to contact them, because if I do, my brain is going to say, no, don't do that. It's protectionary. I get that. But it's like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to get hurt. They're going to say, no, it's going to be painful. Don't do it. That is the most important thing that I've learned in productivity, was that 5-second rule. So thanks a lot for that.
No, that's all right. Funnily enough, I do use that one myself, and I use the 2-minute rule quite often as well. Anything you can achieve in under 2 minutes, just do it now.
Do it now.
In fact, one funny story about the 5-second rule is I was shooting something with Joanna Lumley recently. I don't know if you know who she is, but she's quite a big star in the UK. She was in the New Avengers in the 60s. Anyway, or 70s that possibly was. And anyway, I was literally chatting to her, and she was very, very chatty, and she was always asking about the dog and stuff like that. And I thought I must ask her either to be involved in one of my film projects, not that I had any on the go, or to maybe come onto the show or something like that. And I was literally in the process of asking her when somebody came to me and said, can you come back on set now? And I only got about the first 2 words out, and I thought, I'll just leave it at that. I thought I'll get to her the next time, and of course next time didn't come around. We shot it all and it was done. But it's a great rule, because it does just cut through the fear and makes you just do it. And what have you got to lose?
Exactly. My very Scottish parents used to say that you won't get to jail for asking.
Yep.
The worst someone can say is no.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody gets hurt. They just say no, and you say, okay, well, it wasn't meant to be, and you move on to the next person. Absolutely.
And it's a great way to live your life if you're willing to embrace the risk that's involved.
Yeah.
Finally, and I think you've covered this already, Ian. I'm pretty certain you have. But what's your next big goal in life, and how are you going to get there? There you go. There's a big question to end on.
Well, it's just making this film. I have to make this film. There's a great message in this film that I think needs to be out there, and it's an LGBTQ themed film, and really at its core, it's about, people are people and love is love. And I'm putting my heart and soul into this film. So that's my next big goal, is to just get this film made.
Yeah. And I would say as well, I haven't read, I don't know if you've done another draft after that, I assume you have, but it's a human story. The LGBT thing sounds like it's maybe a hashtag to try and get people interested in what you're doing, but it's effectively a human story at the end of the day, isn't it?
It is. At the end of the day, it truly is about acceptance.
Yeah.
I hate the word tolerance. It's not about tolerance. We tolerate bad weather. We tolerate traffic. We tolerate standing in lines. We accept people.
Well put.
That's what it's about.
So finally, you've mentioned it a couple of times, but let's just sum up for people. Where can people find you? Where can they listen to the show, etc.?
Yeah, so Facebook for my podcast, How They Did It How They Did It filmmaking, you can go to Facebook, and we're at How They Did It podcast. I'm on Twitter at HFilmmaking, and I'm on Instagram at How They Did It filmmaking. You can listen to the show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcast. Just look up the show, How They Did It podcast. And then there's my film. The film, as I said, on Facebook, you can just go to @theclosetmovie. And I've got my website for the film, which is theclosetmovie.org.
Wow. Well, thank you very, very much, Ian, my good friend, for helping me through this first interview show. And just keep doing what you're doing. I'm loving the show. Can't wait to see what happens with your movie as well. It's actually very interesting to see someone go through the same processes I've been through myself in the past. And just all the best with it. Have a great time as well.
Thanks a lot, Carter. This was a lot of fun. And, keep doing what you're doing, because I love your show. You know I love your show. So I hope you're getting a lot of listeners, too. Keep listening, folks.
And thank you once again to Ian O'Neill there for joining me on this, my very first interview show. And it's a sign of things to come, because in season 4, there's going to be 4 separate interview episodes where I'll be interviewing productivity experts and talking about how productivity can be used in the creative industries. And of course, I'll be bringing success into that too. The name change, as Ian mentioned during the episode there, is because I think if productivity is handled correctly, it will lead to success. And I think everyone is interested in success of some type. One thing I'd say about season 4, though, is there's 12 episodes coming, and I am looking for sponsors for those episodes. It's £25 a show. So if you're interested in sponsoring an episode, it would be along the lines of, this episode is sponsored by insert name here, and then it would go into the opening titles. And that would stay up as long as the show is up. That wouldn't just be for a year or whatever. That would be for the entire lifespan of the show. So if you're interested in that, go to the website and go to the contact page and drop me a line, and payments would be made via PayPal, and I'll just explain to you what's going on, either by something on the page or by replying to you directly with an email, which is probably the more sensible thing to do. But for now, folks, take control of your own destiny, seize it, grab it, hold it, move forward with it, keep on shooting, keep on living your life, keep on fighting your day-to-day, keep on listening to the show as well while you're at it. And join me next time on Film Pro Productivity and Success. The music that you are listening to right now is Adventures by Ehumitsu. You can view the show notes for this episode on the official website, filmproproductivity.com, or there will be a version on your app as well. You can follow my personal account on Twitter and Instagram at fight_director, or follow the show on Twitter at FilmProProdPod, or on Facebook at FilmProProductivity. Please support the show by subscribing, spreading the word, and leaving an awesome review.